My name is Helena Matthews, and today, at 45, I need to tell a story I've kept hidden for almost 2 decades. A story of betrayal, abandonment, and a twist that even I couldn't have imagined. You're leaving this house today, Helena, and I never want to see your face again. My husband Edward Sterling's words echo in my mind as if it were yesterday, not 18 years ago. I stood there in the living room of our luxury penthouse in Manhattan, New York, holding the pregnancy test in my trembling hands. And the man I loved looked at me like I was trash. If you've ever experienced the pain of abandonment when you needed support the most, please like this video, because what I'm about to tell you will show how life has mysterious ways of delivering justice. It was March 2006. Edward was 35 and I was 27. We'd been married for 5 years, and I thought we had built something solid. He owned a tech company that generated $5 million annually, and I worked as marketing manager at the same company. I met Edward in business school, and during our 3-year courtship, he always said I was the woman of his life. "Helena, you're my true partner," he used to say, holding my face in his hands. "I want to build an empire with you by my side." I remember perfectly that day when everything changed. It was a Tuesday, March 14th, 2006. At 6:30 p.m., I had just returned from the doctor's appointment, where I received official confirmation I was 6 weeks pregnant. My heart raced with joy and nervousness. Edward and I always talked about having children, but we had never specifically planned when Carla Morrison was in our living room when I arrived. Edward's personal secretary, a 29-year-old woman, blonde, always impeccably dressed in designer clothes. She greeted me with a smile I could never completely decipher and said she was just delivering some urgent reports for Edward to review at home. Double quotes, "Hi, Helena. How was your day?" she asked, her blue eyes sparkling with a curiosity that bothered me. "It was good, Carla. Is Edward in his office?" "Yes, he is. He's a bit stressed about the new contracts, but I'm sure your arrival will cheer him up." I should have noticed something strange in her tone, the way her lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I was so focused on the news I carried, so anxious to share our joy, that I completely ignored the signs. I found Edward in the home office, hunched over papers scattered across the mahogany desk that cost $8,000. He wore a light blue dress shirt, tie loosened, brown hair slightly disheveled. When he looked up and saw me, his expression was tense. "Edward, honey, I need to tell you something wonderful." My voice trembled with emotion. He paused, observing me with a coldness that should have alerted me. "What is it, Helena?" I took a deep breath and smiled, extending the test results to him. "We're having a baby." The silence that followed was deafening. Edward took the paper, read it once, twice. His jaw tightened, and when he looked at me again, there was no joy in his eyes. There was something much worse: anger. "Are you absolutely sure it's mine?" The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. "Edward, how can you ask that? Of course it's yours. We've been married for 5 years. He stood up abruptly, the chair creaking against the wooden floor. "Helena, I know things you think I don't know." "What things?" "What are you talking about?" That's when Carla appeared in the office doorway, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. "Edward, sorry to interrupt, but I need to leave. Tomorrow we'll talk about that special project we discussed." The look she gave me at that moment still gives me chills. It was a look of victory, of someone who had just watched their strategy work perfectly. "Edward," I said, my voice now firmer, "what special project is this? And what things do you think you know about me?" He waited for Carla to leave and closed the door. When he turned to me, his face was transformed into something I didn't recognize. "Carla told me about your conversations with Robert Silva, the director at our competitor company. She saw you having lunch together 3 times last month. She showed me the photos." My blood ran cold. Robert Silva was indeed a director at a competing company, but our meetings were professional. He was trying to hire me to work at his company, and I was considering the proposal because I felt Edward didn't value me adequately at our company. "Edward, you can't be serious. Robert was trying to hire me. I was going to tell you about the job offer. Job offer. He laughed bitterly. Helena, do you think I was born yesterday? Carla told me you two seemed very intimate. And now, suddenly, you show up pregnant. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and I felt like I was sinking in quicksand. Edward, listen to me. You're being manipulated. I don't know why Carla is doing this, but ... no. He shouted, slamming his hand on the desk. Don't blame Carla. She's the only person in this company I can trust completely. She warned me about your behavior because she cares about me. At that moment, I understood that a trap had been carefully set, and I had fallen right into it. But I still didn't comprehend the extent of Carla's plan. Edward, please give me a chance to explain. Robert offered me a marketing director position with a salary of $12,000 per month. I was considering it because I feel like you don't recognize my work here. Our lunches were strictly professional lies. He exploded. Carla told me you were holding hands the last time. It was a lie. Pure lie. Robert and I never had any physical contact beyond formal handshakes. But I could see in Edward's eyes that he had already decided what to believe. If you really want to know the truth, let's do a DNA test when the baby is born, I said desperately. No. His voice was cold as ice. I'm not waiting 9 months to find out if I'm raising another man's child. You're leaving this house today. Edward, please. Today, Helena, pack your things and leave. I'll talk to my lawyer tomorrow about the divorce. I stood in shock for a few seconds, trying to process that the man I loved was throwing me out based on lies. What if you're wrong? What if the baby is yours? He looked at me with contempt. If it's mine, we'll talk. But until then, I don't want you here. That night, I packed my bags, crying while Edward locked himself in his office. I left the $2 million penthouse where we had lived for 3 years. It's taking only 2 suitcases of clothes and $4,500 I had in my personal account. I had nowhere to go. My parents had died in a car accident 2 years earlier, and I had no siblings. My friends were mostly work colleagues who wouldn't feel comfortable if they knew what was happening between Edward and me. I spent the first night at a modest hotel in Queens, paying $89 per night. I lay on the hard bed, my hands on my still flat belly, and promised my unborn child that I would be strong enough for both of us. The next 3 weeks were a nightmare. Edward's lawyers contacted me with divorce papers that were humiliating. According to the documents, I would receive only $25,000 as a settlement and would have no claim to the company or any other assets. Since there was a prenuptial agreement I had signed without reading carefully when we were young and in love. But the worst part was that Edward fired me from the company immediately. Carla made sure to spread rumors that I had been having an affair and trying to steal company secrets. Within a week, my professional reputation in New York's tech industry was destroyed. I tried calling Edward several times, but he had blocked my number. I went to the company building, but security had orders not to let me enter. I even tried talking to some mutual friends, but Carla had gotten there first with her version of the story. Helena, I heard what happened, said Jennifer Walsh, a friend from college who worked at a consulting firm. I can't believe you would do something like that to Edward. He seems so devastated. It was then I realized that Carla hadn't just destroyed my marriage. She had systematically destroyed my entire life in New York. No one would believe my word against hers. With my savings running out and no job prospects, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I would leave New York and start over somewhere else. Far from the web of lies Carla had woven, I researched small towns where the cost of living was affordable and found Millbrook, a town of 8,000 people in upstate New York. It was 200 miles from Manhattan. Far enough to escape my past, but close enough that I could still access medical care during pregnancy. With my remaining $18,000, I rented a small 2-bedroom apartment for $650 per month and began looking for work. The only position available was substitute teaching at the local elementary school, paying $28,000 annually. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, and it would allow me to support my child. I had a business degree and 5 years of marketing experience, but in Millbrook. I was just another single woman trying to make it on her own. The months of pregnancy were lonely, but also transformative. Without the luxury and superficiality of Manhattan life, I discovered a strength I didn't know I possessed. I learned to cook, to budget every dollar, to find joy in simple things like reading at the public library or walking in the town park. My neighbors in Millbrook were kind but not intrusive. Mrs. Dorothy Patterson, a 68-year-old retired nurse who lived next door, became my guardian angel. She taught me everything about pregnancy and childbirth that I didn't learn from books. "Honey," Dorothy said one afternoon as we sat on her porch drinking tea, "I don't know what brought you to our little town, but I can see you're running from something painful. Just remember that sometimes God closes one door to open a better one." On November 15, 2006, Gabriel Edward Matthews was born. Yes, I gave him Edward's middle name even after everything that had happened. He was my son's father, regardless of the circumstances. Gabriel was perfect. Dark hair like Edward's, bright green eyes like mine, and a smile that could light up the darkest room. Holding him for the first time, I knew that every sacrifice had been worth it. The early years were challenging, but filled with love. I worked as a full-time teacher and took evening courses to get additional teaching certifications. Gabriel was a bright, curious child who loved books and numbers. By age 4, he was reading at a second-grade level. "Mom, why don't I have a daddy like the other kids?" Gabriel asked me when he was 5, as we walked home from school. I had prepared for this question, but it still broke my heart. Some families have daddies, others have just mommies. Some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. What matters is that we love each other very much. "But where's my daddy?" I knelt down to his level, looking into those green eyes so much like mine. "Your daddy is far away and he doesn't know about you. But that doesn't mean you're any less loved." Gabriel accepted this explanation with the simplicity of a child. But I knew that eventually I would need to tell him the whole truth. As the years passed, I occasionally looked up Edward online. His company had grown exponentially. By 2010, Sterling Tech was valued at $50 million. In 2012, he married Carla Morrison in a lavish ceremony featured in New York society magazines. The photos showed Edward smiling beside Carla, wore a $30,000 wedding dress. The irony wasn't lost on me that the woman who had destroyed my marriage had gotten exactly what she wanted. But I also noticed something in Edward's eyes in those photos. Despite the smile, there was an emptiness I recognized. It was the same look he had when he was stressed or unhappy during our marriage. Gabriel continued to excel in school. By middle school, he was taking advanced math classes and showed exceptional talent in science. His teachers regularly commented on his intelligence and maturity. "Mrs. Matthews," said Mr. Peterson, Gabriel's 8th grade science teacher, "Gabriel is the most gifted student I've had in 20 years of teaching. You should consider applying to advanced programs for him." I was proud but also worried. Gabriel's exceptional abilities reminded me so much of Edward. Not just his intelligence, but the way he approached problems, his logical thinking. Even some of his facial expressions. In 2018, when Gabriel was 12, we had our first serious conversation about his father. "I've been thinking about my dad a lot lately," he said one evening as we prepared dinner together. "I know you said he doesn't know about me, but don't you think he has a right to know?" I set down the knife I was using to chop vegetables and looked at my son. At 12, he was already tall for his age, with Edward's strong jawline becoming more apparent. "Gabriel, it's complicated. Your father and I had a very difficult separation. He believed things about me that weren't true." "What kind of things?" I sat down across from him at our small kitchen table. "He thought I was unfaithful to him. I wasn't, but someone convinced him I was, and he chose to believe that person instead of me." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "So he doesn't know about me because he thought you cheated on him." "That's right. But Mom, if he knew about me, wouldn't that prove you didn't cheat? I mean, the timing would show I'm his son, right?" My 12-year-old son had just identified the logical flaw in Edward's reasoning that I had tried to point out 12 years earlier. You're absolutely right, Gabriel. But your father was very hurt and angry, and people don't always think clearly when they're in that state. Oh no. Maybe I could contact him myself when I'm older. When I'm 18, the suggestion terrified me, but I could see the determination in Gabriel's eyes. He was growing up, and eventually he would have the right to make his own decisions about his father. If that's what you decide when you're old enough, I'll support you, I said. But for now, let's focus on your education and our life here. High school brought new challenges and triumphs. Gabriel earned a full scholarship to a private preparatory school in Albany, 30 miles away. The daily commute was difficult, but the education opportunities were worth it. Gabriel excelled in advanced placement courses and scored 1580 on his SATs. Several prestigious universities began recruiting him early, including MIT, Stanford, and Harvard. Mom, Harvard sent me another letter, Gabriel said excitedly one day in his junior year. They're offering a full scholarship plus a research stipend. Edward's alma mater. The irony was almost too much to bear. That's wonderful, honey. You've worked so hard for this. But as Gabriel's senior year approached, our lives took an unexpected turn. It started with fatigue. Gabriel, who had always been energetic and active, began feeling tired after school. Then came the nosebleeds, random bruising, and weight loss. I feel dizzy, Gabriel said one morning in October 2023. As he tried to get ready for school, I looked at my son and felt panic rise in my chest. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and there were dark circles under his eyes. We're going to the doctor right now, I said. Grabbing my car keys, Dr. Sarah Henderson at Millbrook Medical Center ran initial blood tests and immediately referred us to a specialist in Albany. Within a week, we had a diagnosis that shattered our world. I'm sorry to tell you this, said Dr. Michael Rodriguez, the hematologist at Albany Medical Center, but Gabriel has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The words hit me like a physical blow. Leukemia. Cancer. My brilliant, beautiful 17-year-old son had cancer. What are his treatment options? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. We'll start with chemotherapy immediately, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Gabriel is young and strong, which works in his favor. However, given the aggressive nature of his particular type of leukemia, he'll likely need a bone marrow transplant. I can be a donor, I said immediately. We'll test you. Of course, but siblings are typically the best matches. Does Gabriel have any siblings? No, he's an only child. What about his father? Paternal relatives. I felt my world shifting beneath my feet. After 18 years of successfully avoiding this conversation, circumstances were forcing me to confront the past. His father isn't in our lives. Dr. Rodriguez looked at me with compassion. Mrs. Matthews, I understand this is complicated, but Gabriel's life may depend on finding the best possible donor match. Parents and siblings are ideal, but extended family members can also be compatible. That night, Gabriel and I had the most difficult conversation of our lives. I heard what the doctor said about needing family members for donors. I think it's time to contact my father. I sat on his hospital bed, holding his hand. At 17, Gabriel looked so much like Edward it was startling. The same intelligent eyes, the same determined jawline, the same logical approach to problems. Gabriel, there's more to the story I haven't told you. Spent the next hour telling him everything. Edward's accusation, Carla's manipulation, the divorce, my struggles as a single mother. Gabriel listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. So my father is Edward Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Tech. He finally asked. Yes, and he has no idea I exist. None. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Are you absolutely certain I'm his son? The question didn't hurt coming from Gabriel the way it had from Edward. My son was asking for logical clarity, not out of mistrust. Gabriel, you were conceived in February 2006. Your father and I were living together, sleeping in the same bed every night. I never had any romantic or physical relationship with Robert Silva or anyone else. You are Edward Sterling's son, and anyone who looks at you can see the resemblance. Gabriel nodded, satisfied with my answer. Then we need to contact him. Not for me to have a relationship with him, but because I need a bone marrow transplant to live. The practical nature of his statement broke my heart. My 17-year-old son was facing his own mortality with a maturity that should have been beyond his years. Gabriel, you have to understand that your father might not believe us. He might think this is some kind of scheme to get money from him. Then we'll do a DNA test. Mom, I've researched his company. Sterling Tech is now worth $200 million. He can afford to help, and morally, he should want to help his own son. I realized that hiding from the past was no longer an option. My son's life depended on confronting the man who had abandoned us. 18 years ago. But I had no idea how to reach Edward after all these years. His personal contact information would be impossible to obtain. And going through official company channels seemed futile. Then I remembered something. Margaret Collins, a woman I had worked with briefly at Sterling Tech, had connected with me on LinkedIn a few years earlier. She might still be at the company and could provide insight into the best way to approach Edward. I sent Margaret a careful message explaining that I needed to contact Edward about a family emergency. To my surprise, she responded within hours. Helena, I remember you. I always wondered what happened to you after you left so suddenly. I still work at Sterling Tech, though Edward is much more isolated now than he used to be. He and Carla divorced 2 years ago under very public and messy circumstances. She tried to take half his company in the divorce settlement. This was unexpected information. Edward and Carla were divorced. Margaret continued, if you need to reach Edward urgently, your best bet is his assistant, Jennifer Park. She screens all his communications, but she's fair and professional. If you explain it's a genuine emergency, she'll likely get the message to him. That evening, I spent hours crafting an email to Jennifer Park. How do you explain in a professional email that your boss has a son he doesn't know about who is dying of cancer? I finally settled on a straightforward approach. Ms. Park, my name is Helena Matthews, formerly Helena Sterling. I was married to Edward Sterling from 2001 to 2006. I have urgent medical information regarding a family member that Mr. Sterling needs to know about immediately. This is a matter of life and death. I can be reached at this email address or by phone at 518 555 0147. Sincerely, Helena Matthews. I sent the email at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, not expecting a response for several days. To my shock, my phone rang at 9:15 a.m. the next morning. Ms. Matthews, this is Jennifer Park, Mr. Sterling's assistant. I received your email. Can you please provide more specific information about the nature of this emergency? My hands trembled as I held the phone. Ms. Park, I need to speak directly with Edward. With Mr. Sterling, I know this sounds strange, but there are things he needs to know that I can't discuss with anyone else. Mr. Sterling has very limited availability, and he's instructed me to screen all personal calls very carefully. His divorce from Ms. Morrison was quite public, and he's received numerous false claims and requests for money. Carla, even after their divorce, she was still complicating Edward's life. Ms. Park, I understand his caution, but this isn't about money. This is about family medical information that could be a matter of life and death. There was a pause. Can you hold for a moment? Jennifer put me on hold for what felt like hours but was probably only 3 minutes. When she returned, her tone was different. Ms. Matthews, Mr. Sterling has agreed to speak with you briefly. I'm transferring you now. My heart pounded as I heard the familiar voice that had haunted my dreams for 18 years. Helena. Hello, Edward. Jennifer said this was about a medical emergency. Are you sick? No, Edward. It's about your son. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had been disconnected. Oh, my son. His voice was barely a whisper. Gabriel. He's 17 years old, Edward. He was born 8 months after you threw me out of our home. And he's dying. Another long silence. When Edward spoke again, his voice was shaky. Helena, if this is some kind of scheme, it's not. Gabriel has leukemia. He needs a bone marrow transplant, and family members are the best potential donors. I wouldn't contact you after 18 years if our son's life wasn't at stake. Our son, Edward repeated, as if testing the words. Yes, Edward, our son. The child I was carrying when you accused me of infidelity and threw me out of our home based on Carla's lies. Edward was quiet for so long I began to worry he had hung up. Edward, are you there? I'm here. His voice was different now, strained. Helena, we need to talk. In person. Can you come to New York? Edward Gabriel is in the hospital in Albany. I can't leave him for long, and then I'll come to Albany. Give me the hospital information. Edward, before you agree to anything, I think you should know that Gabriel looks exactly like you. Anyone who sees him will know immediately that he's your son. Send me a photo. I had dozens of photos of Gabriel on my phone. But I chose one from his 17th birthday celebration 3 months earlier. He was smiling at the camera, wearing a blue button-down shirt that almost exactly matched one I remembered Edward wearing years ago. I sent the photo and waited. Edward called back within 5 minutes. Jesus Christ, Helena. He looks exactly like me at that age. I know. I'll be in Albany tomorrow morning. Which hospital? Albany Medical Center, Pediatric Oncology Wing, Helena. Yes. If he's really my son, if I was wrong about everything 18 years ago, Edward, we can discuss the past later. Right now, Gabriel needs help. That's all that matters. The next morning, I sat in Gabriel's hospital room, watching my son read a physics textbook despite his fatigue and the 4-line in his arm. He looked up when I entered. Is he coming? Yes. He'll be here this morning. Gabriel nodded calmly. Are you nervous? I considered lying, but Gabriel deserved honesty. Terrified. Mom, whatever happened between you two in the past, he's here now. That's what counts. At 10:47 a.m., there was a soft knock on the door. I opened it to find Edward Sterling standing in the hallway, looking almost exactly as I remembered him, just with some gray at his temples and lines around his eyes. But it was his expression that struck me most. He looked like a man who had been carrying a tremendous weight for years and was just beginning to understand its true burden. Helena, Edward. We stared at each other for a moment, 18 years of pain and regret hanging between us. Then Gabriel spoke from his bed. Are you my father? Edward stepped into the room and looked at Gabriel. The resemblance was so striking that Edward actually took a step backward. My God, he whispered. You look exactly like me when I was your age. Gabriel smiled. So I've been told. I'm Gabriel Matthews. And yes, I know your last name is Sterling, but Mom never changed her name back after the divorce. Edward approached the bed slowly. Gabriel. That's a good name. Mom chose it. She said it means God is my strength. Edward's eyes filled with tears. Gabriel, I don't know what to say. I didn't know you existed. I know. Mom explained everything. But that's all in the past now. Right now, I need to know if you're willing to get tested as a potential bone marrow donor. Edward didn't hesitate. Of course. Whatever you need. And if you're not a match, I need to know if you have siblings or parents who might be willing to be tested. My parents died in a car accident 3 years ago, Edward said quietly. But I have a younger sister, Amanda, and a younger brother, Michael. They'll both want to help. Gabriel smiled again. Good. The more potential donors, the better my chances. Dr. Rodriguez arrived an hour later to explain the testing process. Edward listened intently to every detail, asking the same careful questions I would have expected from him in a business meeting. Mr. Sterling, Dr. Rodriguez said, we'll have initial blood work results within 48 hours. If you're a preliminary match, we'll do more detailed testing. Doctor, cost is no object here. Whatever Gabriel needs, however long the treatment takes, money is not a factor. I felt relief wash over me. Whatever else had happened between us, Edward was stepping up as a father now. After Dr. Rodriguez left, Edward, Gabriel, and I sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Can I ask you something? Gabriel finally said to Edward, anything. Do you hate my mother? The question caught both Edward and me off guard. Edward looked at me, then back at Gabriel. No, Gabriel, I don't hate your mother. I was angry for a very long time, but I don't hate her. Were you wrong about what you accused her of? Edward was quiet for a long moment. Gabriel, your mother and I have a lot to discuss about the past, but right now, you're what matters most. With respect, sir, I'm 17 years old and I have cancer. I don't have time for adults to dance around the truth. If you're my father, I want to know what really happened between you and my mother. Edward looked at me. May I tell him? I nodded. Edward spent the next 30 minutes telling Gabriel about Carla's manipulation, accusations against me, and the divorce. He didn't try to justify his actions or blame everything on Carla. Gabriel, I made terrible decisions based on jealousy and pride. I didn't trust your mother when I should have. I let someone else poison my mind against the woman I loved. You still love her? Gabriel asked bluntly. Edward looked directly at me. Gabriel, I never stopped loving your mother. That's what made the betrayal so painful. But I was wrong about the betrayal. It never happened. I felt tears running down my cheeks. After 18 years, Edward was finally acknowledging the truth. Mom, Gabriel said, do you still love him? I looked at my son, then at Edward. Gabriel, I loved your father enough to name you after him despite everything that happened. I've been angry, hurt, and disappointed, but I never stopped loving him either. Edward stood up and walked to my chair. Helena, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness after what I put you through. You raised our son alone because of my stupidity and pride. Edward, please let me finish. I've spent 18 years thinking I was right to feel betrayed. I've been married to and divorced from the woman who destroyed our family with her lies. I've built a successful company but had no real family to share it with. I've been miserable, Helena. Gabriel was watching this exchange with fascination. So, what happens now? Edward and I looked at each other, then at our son. Now, Edward said we focus on getting you healthy. Everything else can wait. The blood test results came back 36 hours later. Dr. Rodriguez called us all into his office with an expression I couldn't read. I have good news and challenging news, he began. The good news is that Mr. Sterling is indeed a preliminary match for Gabriel. The genetic markers confirm he's Gabriel's biological father, and he has compatible tissue typing. Edward closed his eyes in relief. The challenging news, Dr. Rodriguez continued, is that Gabriel's condition has progressed faster than we hoped. We need to proceed with the transplant within the next 2 weeks. Then we proceed, Edward said immediately. What do you need from me? Over the next 10 days, Edward essentially moved to Albany. He stayed at a hotel near the hospital and spent every available moment learning about Gabriel, his interests, his achievements, his dreams for the future. Dad, Gabriel said one afternoon. He had started calling Edward Dad within 3 days, which surprised both Edward and me. Mom showed me articles about your company. You've built something really impressive. Thank you, son. But looking at you, I think your mother built something much more impressive. Gabriel grinned. I get my intelligence from both of you, but I get my good looks from Mom. Edward laughed, the first time I'd heard him laugh in 18 years. You definitely get your sense of humor from her, too. The bone marrow transplant took place on a Tuesday morning in December 2023. I sat in the waiting room while Edward underwent the extraction procedure, and Gabriel prepared to receive his father's bone marrow. Mrs. Matthews, a nurse approached me during the procedure. Mr. Sterling asked me to give you this. It was a handwritten note. Helena, whatever happens today. I want you to know that Gabriel is the most extraordinary young man I've ever met. You raised him with intelligence, integrity, and strength. You gave him everything I failed to provide. Thank you for being the mother he needed when I wasn't the father he deserved. Edward, I was still crying when Edward was wheeled past my waiting area on his way to recovery. He saw me and reached out his hand. I took it. How do you feel? I asked. Like I've finally done something meaningful with my life, he said. Gabriel's recovery was slow but steady. Edward's bone marrow was an excellent match, and within 6 weeks, Gabriel's blood work showed significant improvement during those weeks. Edward and I had long conversations about the past, the present, and the future. He told me about his miserable marriage to Carla, who had been manipulative and cold throughout their relationship. I knew within a year that marrying Carla was a mistake, he admitted. But I was too proud to admit I had been wrong about everything. I thought I deserved an unhappy marriage after what I believed I had done to you. Edward, you were manipulated by someone who was very skilled at manipulation. Carla destroyed our marriage, but you were a victim too. Helena, I was a 35-year-old man who should have trusted his wife over his secretary. I was responsible for my choices. We also talked about Gabriel's future. The bone marrow transplant was successful, but Gabriel would need ongoing monitoring and care. I want to pay for Gabriel's college education, Edward said, and I want to establish a trust fund for his future. Edward, you don't need to. Helena, I missed 17 years of child support. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, school plays, parent-teacher conferences, teaching him to drive, helping with homework, and everything else that fathers do. I can't buy back those years, but I can invest in his future. Gabriel was discharged from the hospital in February 2024. Exactly 18 years after that terrible day when Edward threw me out of our home. There's something I want to discuss with both of you. Gabriel said as we sat in my small apartment in Millbrook. Edward had been visiting every weekend, and Gabriel had been accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship, plus the promise of additional support from his father. What is it, honey? I asked. I want us to be a family. Not necessarily the traditional kind, because you two have a lot of history to work through. But I want my parents to be friends. I want us to spend holidays together. I want to know that when I go to college, the two people who gave me life are both part of my life. Edward and I looked at each other. Edward said carefully, your mother and I hurt each other very badly years ago. We're working on forgiveness and friendship, but we need to take it slowly. I understand. But Dad, you bought a house in Albany to be closer to the hospital during my treatment? And Mom, you've been considering taking a teaching job in Albany for the better schools. It was true. Edward had purchased a beautiful home 20 minutes from the hospital, and I had been offered a position teaching high school English in Albany. What are you suggesting? I asked. I'm suggesting that you both move to Albany. You don't have to live together, but you could live near each other. I could spend time with both of you. We could be a family, just not a conventional one. 6 months later, I was teaching at Albany Academy, a prestigious private school. Gabriel was thriving in his senior year, healthy and preparing for Harvard. Edward had moved his company's headquarters to Albany to be closer to us, and Edward and I, we were taking it slowly, but I'd be lying if I said the old feelings weren't still there. 18 years of separation hadn't erased the love we had shared, just buried it under pain and misunderstanding. Helena, Edwards said one evening as we watched Gabriel play chess with another patient during a routine follow-up visit. Do you think we could try again? Not rush into anything, but see if we can rebuild what we lost. I looked at this man who had broken my heart, who had given me the greatest gift of my life in Gabriel, who had returned when our son needed him most. Edward, I think we owe it to ourselves and to Gabriel to try. 1 year later, in March 2025, Edward Sterling and Helena Matthews were remarried in a small ceremony in Millbrook, with Gabriel serving as best man. You know, Gabriel said in his speech at the reception, most kids whose parents get divorced hope they'll get back together someday, but not many get to see their parents marry each other for the second time after finding each other again through their child's illness. He paused. looking at Edward and me sitting together at the head table. My dad spent 18 years thinking he had lost the love of his life to betrayal. My mom spent 18 years thinking the man she loved had chosen to believe lies over truth. I spent 17 years without knowing my father existed. But sometimes, when the universe has been particularly unfair to you, it finds a way to balance the scales. Gabriel raised his glass to second chances, to family, and to the truth that love really can conquer all, even 18 years of separation. As I looked around the room at the faces of our small gathering, Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor who had become like a grandmother to Gabriel, Dr. Rodriguez, who had saved our son's life, Jennifer Park, who had become a close friend, and most importantly, Edward and Gabriel, the two men who had given my life meaning, I realized something profound. The 18 years I had spent as a single mother weren't wasted years. They were necessary years. I needed to become strong enough to raise Gabriel on my own. Gabriel needed to grow up understanding the value of hard work and independence. And Edward needed to learn the consequences of letting pride and jealousy override love and trust. Mrs. Sterling, Gabriel said. Using my married name for the first time, I have something to tell you and Dad. Edward and I looked at our son with concern. Any unexpected announcements still made us nervous after his cancer battle. I've decided what I want to major in at Harvard. What's that, honey? I asked pre-med. I want to become a pediatric oncologist like Dr. Rodriguez. I want to help other kids like me. And I want to help other families like ours find their way back to each other. Edward reached across the table and took Gabriel's hand. I think that's a perfect choice, son. And Gabriel continued with a grin. I've also decided that when I graduate from medical school, I want to open a practice in Albany. So you two better plan on staying here for the long haul. Edward and I laughed. Our son was already planning our future together that night, as Edward and I sat on the porch of our new home in Albany, watching the sunset and listening to Gabriel practice piano inside. I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us back together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Gabriel hadn't gotten sick? I asked Edward. Every day, he admitted. I probably would have spent the rest of my life thinking I was right to feel betrayed. Gabriel's illness forced me to confront the truth about everything. Do you think we would have found each other again eventually? Edward was quiet for a moment. I hope so. But I'm grateful we don't have to find out. As I write this story now, Gabriel is healthy, thriving at Harvard, and planning to spend the summer working at a research hospital in Boston. Edward and I have been remarried for 9 months, and we're expecting our second child, a daughter we plan to name Grace, because Grace is what allowed our family to find each other again. Edward still owns Sterling Tech, but he's stepped back from day-to-day operations to spend more time with family. I'm still teaching, but now at a prestigious private school where I feel valued and respected. Carla Morrison. She moved to California after her divorce from Edward and has apparently reinvented herself as a life coach. Edward and I don't discuss her anymore. She's part of our past, not our future. The most important lesson I've learned from our story is this. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you leads to the best thing that happens to you. Edward's betrayal and abandonment led to 18 years of struggle. But it also led to raising Gabriel independently, becoming stronger than I ever knew I could be, and ultimately reuniting with the love of my life under circumstances that proved our love was real. To anyone watching this who's been betrayed, abandoned, or forced to raise children alone, your strength is greater than you know. Your children are watching how you handle adversity, and they're learning from your example. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe finds a way to balance the scales of justice in the most unexpected ways. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear that second. Chances are possible. Like this video if you believe that love really can conquer all obstacles. And subscribe to our channel for more stories of families who found their way back to each other against all odds. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that include forgiveness, redemption, and the recognition that real love is worth fighting for, even if it takes 18 years to win the battle.